The grand hall was in chaos. Bodies lay sprawled on the marble floor, lifeless. The lavish banquet table, once adorned with the kingdom's finest sushi, was now a battlefield of toppled dishes and spilled sake. The aroma of fish and rice, which once brought delight, now felt like the stench of betrayal. The emperor, seated on his golden throne, clutched his chest, his face twisted in agony. His voice trembled as he roared, "Who dares poison the emperor's court? Who dares ruin the sacred name of sushi in my kingdom?" His words echoed, but there was no answer. Only the eerie silence of the dying court remained. He glanced around. His most trusted advisors, the warriors of his kingdom, and even the servants who had served him loyally, all were gasping for air or lying still. He slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne. This is treachery, a crime against sushi itself. His lips quivered as he stared at the platter before him, the culprit, a sour piece of sushi. The court physician staggered toward the emperor, sweat dripping down his pale face. "Your Majesty, it's too late. The poison, it's spreading faster than we can counteract. It's in the rice, the fish, the seaweed. The court, it's finished." The emperor's heart raced. He had ruled for decades, feared and revered, and yet, it was a single plate of sushi that had brought his empire to its knees. He bellowed again, his voice cracking under the weight of despair. "How could this happen? How could my kingdom, built on the beauty of sushi, fall to something so vile?" His eyes darted to the lifeless body of his most beloved advisor, a man who had stood by him through every conquest. Beside him lay the emperor's wife, her once vibrant gaze now empty. His fists clenched. Was it greed? Was it vengeance? Who has done this to me? The golden sushi platter gleamed under the dimming light of the hall, mocking him. The emperor whispered, his voice trembling with both fear and fury. "Is this the end of my kingdom? Has sushi turned against me? Who could have crafted this deadly dish? Was it a mistake or a deliberate act of revenge? And who, in a kingdom that adored sushi above all else, would dare betray the emperor through his greatest love?" In the heart of the kingdom of Sushivania, sushi was not just food, it was life. Every meal, every celebration, every royal decree revolved around the perfection of sushi. The streets buzzed with the aroma of fresh fish and seaweed, while the finest chefs in the land competed to craft rolls that could bring even the harshest critic to tears. But for all its beauty, Sushivania's love for sushi had a dark side. The emperor, a man of towering presence and an unyielding gaze, sat on his golden throne, twirling a pair of jade chopsticks in his fingers. "This is unacceptable," he roared, his voice shaking the grand hall. "How dare anyone present such mediocre sushi to me?" The trembling chef before him fell to his knees, begging for mercy. "Your Majesty, please, it was a mistake. The fish was fresh, but—" "Silence," the emperor interrupted, his face red with fury. "Do you think I care for excuses? In this kingdom, sushi must be perfect. Always." The chef's pleas faded as guards dragged him away. Everyone in the court knew what came next. The emperor did not forgive failures, especially when it came to his beloved sushi. Even the empress, seated beside him, barely earned a glance from her husband. She sighed, her jeweled fingers fidgeting with her sash. "Perhaps, my love, you could show a bit of leniency. The chefs work tirelessly to please you." The emperor turned to her with a cold glare. "If they cannot meet my standards, they have no place in this palace, or this world." His words sent a shiver through the court. The empress lowered her eyes, knowing any further protest would be futile. But the emperor's obsession went beyond the palace. The kingdom's resources were stretched thin in the pursuit of sushi perfection. Sushivania lacked fertile lands for rice and an abundant supply of fish. To satisfy their endless cravings, they frequently raided the neighboring kingdom of Eldoria, a small and peaceful land. "Bring me the best rice and fish from Eldoria," the emperor commanded his generals during council meetings. "If they resist, remind them that Sushivania's strength is unmatched. Their resources belong to us. The invasions were brutal. Eldoria's people wept as their fields were stripped bare and their rivers emptied of fish. But the emperor showed no remorse. To him, sushi was worth any cost. Sushi is the pride of Sushivania, he often declared. Without it, we are nothing. And so, the kingdom thrived on the suffering of others. But beneath the glittering surface of their sushi-filled banquets, whispers of discontent began to grow. The people of Eldoria had endured enough, and somewhere in the shadows a plan was brewing. Would the emperor ever see the limits of his obsession, or would it be his undoing? In the quiet kingdom of Eldoria, peace had once been a way of life. The rolling fields of golden rice and the clear rivers teeming with fish had provided for its people for generations. Farmers worked from dawn to dusk, and families gathered under the stars to share simple meals. Life was modest but content, until Sushivania's shadow loomed over them. The invasions began like storms, sudden and merciless. Eldoria's people would wake to the sound of marching soldiers, their banners emblazoned with the symbol of Sushivania. These invaders swept through villages, taking rice, fish, and anything else needed to fuel their emperor's obsession. The once thriving rivers ran empty, and the fields grew bare. "Mama, why can't we eat sushi like the soldiers?" a young boy asked, as he watched the invaders feast on food taken from their lands. His mother's eyes filled with tears. "Because, my son, our sushi is stolen before we can even make it." The people of Eldoria tried to resist, but they were no match for Sushivania's army. Each invasion left behind ruined homes, empty storerooms, and broken spirits. The Eldorian king, desperate to protect his people, sent emissaries to plead for mercy, but they never returned. Queen Mira, a woman of quiet strength, bore the weight of the kingdom's despair. She walked among her people, listening to their stories of loss and heartache. A farmer knelt before her, his hands rough and trembling. "Your Majesty, they took everything. My family hasn't eaten in days. How much longer must we suffer?" Mira placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I promise you, this will not last forever. Eldoria may be small, but we are not powerless." Her words gave little comfort. The people's eyes, once bright with hope, now carried the dull weight of despair. Children went to bed hungry, and elders whispered prayers for a miracle. Each new invasion brought more suffering, more pain. But amidst the anguish, a seed of defiance began to grow. Mira gathered her council in the dim light of the palace's war room. The walls were lined with maps of Eldoria and Sushivania, showing the endless trail of destruction. "We cannot fight them with swords," Mira said, her voice steady. "Their army is too strong. But perhaps we can fight them in a way they won't expect." Her advisors looked at her with a mix of doubt and curiosity. "What do you propose, Your Majesty?" one of them asked. Myra's gaze was firm. "We will strike them where it hurts the most, their sushi. If we can infiltrate their court and disrupt their precious meals, we might finally have a chance to reclaim our freedom." Her plan was audacious and dangerous. Eldoria had no spies, no assassins. They were a peaceful people, untrained in the arts of deception. But their desperation left no room for fear. Volunteers would need to step forward, someone brave enough to risk everything to save their kingdom. As the council debated, Mira stepped outside to look over her broken land. She clenched her fists, the weight of her people's suffering burning in her chest. "Sushivania will pay for this," she whispered to the night. "One way or another." The seed of resistance had been planted, but could it grow strong enough to topple an empire? The fate of Eldoria depended on it. Queen Myra's council chamber was heavy with silence. The air, thick with tension, carried the weight of countless defeats. The map of Eldoria spread across the table told the same story. Invaded fields, stolen rivers, and villages reduced to ashes. Yet Myra's gaze held a spark of defiance as she addressed her advisors. "We can no longer sit and wait for mercy that will never come," she began. "The Emperor of Sushivania takes what he wants and leaves us to starve. If we do not act now, Eldoria will fade into history." But Your Majesty, one advisor said hesitantly, their army is unstoppable. We cannot match their strength. Mira nodded. Which is why we won't fight their army. We will fight their obsession. She paused, letting the words sink in. We will send someone into their court. Someone who can strike at the heart of their empire, their sushi. Gasps echoed through the chamber. A spy, another advisor asked. Your Majesty, that is dangerous, if they discover the truth. Yes, Mira said firmly. It is dangerous. But it is our only chance. Their strength comes from their obsession with sushi. If we can disrupt that, we can break their power. The room fell silent once more. The plan was bold, perhaps reckless, but there was no denying its necessity. Mira looked out over her council. We need someone brave, skilled, and ready to sacrifice everything for Eldoria. For days, no one came forward. The weight of such a mission was too great. Then, just as hope began to waver, a quiet voice broke the silence in the palace courtyard. I will go. All eyes turned to Hana, a young woman with steady hands and a quiet determination. She was a sushi maker, one of Eldoria's finest, though her craft had been overshadowed by the endless invasions. Are you certain? Mira asked, stepping closer to Hana. This is not just about making sushi. You will need to earn their trust, infiltrate their court, and execute the plan without faltering. Hana met the queen's gaze without hesitation. I have lost family to Sushivania's greed. My home is in ruins. If I can use my skills to stop them, then I will do whatever it takes. Mira placed a hand on Hana's shoulder. You are brave, Hana. Eldoria will remember your courage. Hana's training began immediately. The palace kitchens were transformed into a covert training ground, where Eldoria's remaining sushi masters shared their knowledge. They taught her how to create sushi so flawless it could captivate even the Emperor of Sushivania. But Hana's journey was more than learning recipes. She had to master deception, diplomacy, and survival. Each night, as she worked late into the evening, doubts crept into her mind. What if I fail? She whispered to herself one night. What if they see through me? Queen Mira found her staring at a half-finished sushi roll. Hana, she said gently, fear is natural. But remember why you're doing this. You are not alone. Eldoria stands with you. Hana nodded, drawing strength from the queen's words. I won't let you down. When the day came for Hana to leave, the entire village gathered to see her off. Some wept, others whispered prayers, but all shared a look of hope. Mira handed Hana a small pendant. This will remind you of home. No matter where you go, you carry Eldoria's spirit with you. Hana bowed deeply. I will not fail. As she crossed the border into Sushivania, disguised as a traveling sushi chef, the enormity of her mission settled on her shoulders. She was alone in enemy territory, armed only with her skills and the hope of her people. Every step she took brought her closer to the Emperor's court, and to the danger that awaited her there. Would her sushi be enough to win the Emperor's trust? Could she carry out her plan without being discovered? Hana's journey had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. Hana's heart pounded as she approached the gates of the grand capital of Sushivania. The city was a glittering maze of towering buildings, bustling markets, and banners bearing the Emperor's emblem. The aroma of sushi wafted through the air, a constant reminder of the kingdom's obsession. Dressed as a traveling sushi chef, Hana stepped into the heart of the city. She marveled at the abundance of ingredients she had only ever dreamed of, but this was no time to be distracted. She made her way to the palace gates, her disguise perfected, her tools ready. The palace guard eyed her suspiciously. Who are you, and what do you want? I am Hana, she said, bowing deeply. A sushi maker from far away. I've come to offer my skills to the Emperor. The guard laughed. The Emperor has executed more chefs than you've seen sushi rolls. You think you're better than all of them? Hana's face remained calm. Let me prove myself. If my sushi fails, you can send me away, or worse. Intrigued by her confidence, the guard escorted her inside. Word spread quickly, and soon Hana stood before the Emperor himself. His piercing eyes scrutinized her as servants prepared the table for her demonstration. "You claim to be a master sushi maker," the emperor said. "Then show me." With steady hands, Hana crafted sushi unlike any the court had seen. She used precise cuts and delicate arrangements, each roll a work of art. When the emperor tasted her creation, his eyes widened. The court murmured in astonishment. "Impressive," the emperor said, leaning back on his throne. "You may stay." Hana bowed deeply, concealing the relief flooding through her. She had passed the first test, but the true challenges were just beginning. Life in the palace was a web of intrigue. Hana kept her head low, observing everything and speaking only when spoken to. She learned quickly that the emperor's court was as dangerous as it was luxurious. One evening, while preparing ingredients, she overheard two advisors whispering in the shadows. "If we don't secure more resources soon, the emperor will turn on us," one said. "Then let's make sure the next raid on Eldoria is swift," the other replied. Hana's grip tightened on her knife. These were the men orchestrating the suffering of her people. She kept her expression neutral, but inside her resolve hardened. Her careful observations brought her to Lord Takeshi, an advisor who often appeared conflicted during council meetings. He was not like the others. His eyes held a weariness that suggested disillusionment with the emperor's tyranny. One day, while delivering a platter of sushi to his chambers, Hana decided to take a chance. "Lord Takeshi," she said quietly, "may I speak freely?" He raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "The emperor's obsession is destroying lives," she said carefully. "Does that not trouble you?" Takeshi's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Hana thought she had gone too far. But then he sighed. "You're brave to say such things. Brave, or foolish." From that day on, Takeshi began to trust her, though cautiously. He shared details about the court's inner workings, alliances, and rivalries. With his help, Hana began to piece together her plan. But she knew she was walking a thin line. Trust could be as fragile as seaweed in the emperor's court. The idea came to Hana late one night as she prepared a batch of sushi for the next day's banquet. She would create a dish so subtly poisoned that it would incapacitate the emperor's advisors without immediately revealing its source. The plan was risky, but it was the only way to weaken the emperor's power. She began sourcing rare ingredients, ones that could mask the poison while enhancing the flavor. But her actions did not go unnoticed. "Why are you asking about these herbs?" a fellow chef asked one evening, suspicion in his voice. "I'm experimenting with new flavors," Hana replied smoothly. "The emperor deserves only the best." The chef's eyes lingered on her for a moment before he nodded and walked away. Hana's heart raced. Any slip could mean exposure. As she prepared the sour sushi, she tested small amounts on herself, ensuring the balance was perfect. The poison was subtle, enough to cause weakness and confusion, but not immediate death. It would buy her time to execute the next phase of her plan. By the time the dish was complete, Hana felt the weight of her mission heavier than ever. Every piece of sushi she placed on the platter carried the hopes of Eldoria. But would it be enough to bring the emperor's court to its knees? The banquet was approaching, and Hana's carefully laid plan teetered on the edge of success or catastrophe. Hana's movements around the palace had grown more calculated, but not unnoticed. Lord Takeshi, the disillusioned advisor, had begun piecing together her subtle actions. The way she lingered during council meetings, her questions about specific courtiers, and her requests for rare ingredients, all of it nagged at the back of his mind. One evening, as Hana prepared sushi in the dimly lit kitchen, Takeshi appeared in the doorway. "You work late, Hana," he said, his tone unreadable. Hana froze for a moment before turning to him with a polite smile. "Perfection takes time, Lord Takeshi. The emperor demands nothing less." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, you seem to have an interest in things beyond sushi. Tell me, Hana, where do your loyalties truly lie?" The room felt colder as Hana met his gaze. She knew this moment would come, but not so soon. My loyalty is to excellence, she said carefully, to ensuring the emperor receives the finest creations. Takeshi studied her, his expression softening slightly but not losing its edge. You're clever, Hana, but I'm not blind. You're not like the others. You move with purpose and hesitation. If there's something I should know, now is the time to tell me. Hana hesitated. Could she trust him? Takeshi's disdain for the emperor was clear, but his loyalty to the regime was less certain. I only wish to serve well, my lord, she finally said. The emperor's demands leave little room for error. Takeshi's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. Be careful, Hana, he said quietly. In this palace, even the smallest slip can cost you everything. As he left, Hana's hands trembled. She had narrowly avoided suspicion, but the line between ally and enemy was growing dangerously thin. Meanwhile, the emperor's paranoia was reaching new heights. I sense betrayal in my court, the emperor declared during a meeting. His eyes darted to each advisor, his fingers drumming the armrest of his throne. I will not tolerate failure, not in my court, not in my Sushi. The advisors nodded nervously, exchanging uneasy glances. Hana's heart raced as the emperor's gaze briefly settled on her. The pressure was mounting, and every move she made felt like walking a tightrope over a sea of suspicion. The grand banquet hall was a vision of luxury. Golden lanterns illuminated the long table laden with the kingdom's finest delicacies. At the center of it all was the emperor, seated on his gilded throne, waiting for the sushi that would crown the feast. Hana worked silently in the kitchen, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her. The sour sushi, her masterpiece of sabotage, was nearly complete. Each piece was crafted with care, the poison carefully balanced to avoid immediate detection. She placed the platter on a gilded tray, her mind racing with the weight of her actions. As the servants carried the sushi to the banquet hall, Hana followed at a distance, her heart pounding. She entered the hall to the sound of laughter and clinking cups. The emperor raised a hand and the room fell silent. Tonight, we celebrate the excellence of Sushivania, he declared. And the skill of our newest chef, Hana. Bring forth her creation. The platter was placed before him, and the advisors leaned in eagerly. The emperor picked up a piece with his jade chopsticks and held it aloft. To perfection, he said, before taking a bite. The room erupted in applause, but Hana watched closely. The emperor's expression remained unchanged, his movements deliberate as he ate. Then the advisors began to partake, their praise filling the hall. But soon, subtle signs began to emerge. A bead of sweat on one advisor's brow. A slight tremor in another's hand. Whispers spread as one by one, the advisors' faces paled, and they began to falter. What is happening? The emperor demanded, his voice sharp. His advisors struggled to speak, their breaths labored. Servants rushed to their aid, but confusion quickly turned to chaos. Hana remained still, her face a mask of calm. Inside, her heart raced as she fought to maintain her composure. The sour sushi was working, but the consequences were unfolding faster than she had anticipated. Guards, the emperor bellowed, rising from his throne. Find out who is responsible for this treachery. The hall descended into panic, and Hana knew her time was running out. She slipped away from the commotion, her mind racing with the next steps of her plan. The banquet had been her gamble, and now the game had truly begun. The grand banquet hall was unrecognizable. The once proud courtiers of Sushivania stumbled and clutched at their chests, their faces pale with fear and confusion. Advisors who had stood by the emperor's side for years, now collapsed onto the marble floor, gasping for breath. The emperor himself, though untouched by the poison, roared in frustration. This is treachery, he bellowed, his voice echoing through the chaos. Find the traitor, find them now. Guards scrambled to restore order, but the court was already unraveling. Whispers of betrayal filled the air, each advisor accusing the other. You planned this, one shouted, pointing a trembling finger. You've always wanted my position. Hana stood at the edge of the room, her heart pounding as she watched her plan take effect. The poisoned Sushi had done its work, sowing doubt and discord among the Emperor's closest allies. But this was only the beginning. She needed to ensure that the Emperor's power would crumble completely. Lord Takeshi appeared at her side, his expression grim. "The court is turning on itself," he said quietly. "But the Emperor won't fall without a fight. What is your next move?" Hana glanced at him, her mind racing. Could she trust him to see this through? "We need to amplify the chaos," she whispered. "The Emperor's paranoia is his weakness. If he begins to doubt even his closest allies, his power will break." Takeshi nodded. "I'll spread the word among the guards. Let the rumors grow." He hesitated, then added, "Be careful, Hana. The Emperor's wrath is not easily escaped." As Takeshi slipped into the crowd, Hana moved toward the kitchens, her thoughts focused on the next phase of her plan. The court's alliances were crumbling, but the Emperor's hold on power was still strong. She needed to act quickly before suspicion fell on her. The palace was silent as Hana stepped into the throne room. The once grand hall now felt like a tomb, its golden banners tarnished by the weight of betrayal. The Emperor sat on his throne, his face a mask of fury and exhaustion. "You," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "You've come to gloat, haven't you?" Hana took a steadying breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for. "No, Your Majesty," she said, her voice calm. "I've come to tell you the truth." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "The truth? And what truth could a mere chef possibly offer me?" Hana stepped closer, her hands trembling but her resolve firm. "I am not who you think I am. I come from Eldoria, the kingdom you have ravaged for years. My people have suffered because of your greed, your obsession, and now, it ends." The Emperor rose from his throne, his anger boiling over. "You dare to stand before me and admit to this treachery?" "Yes," Hana said, meeting his gaze. "Because your reign is over. Your court is in ruins, your advisors have turned against you, and your power is slipping through your fingers. This is justice, Your Majesty. Justice for Eldoria." For a moment, the Emperor said nothing. Then with a roar of fury, he lunged at her. But Hana was ready. She sidestepped his attack, her movements quick and deliberate. Guards burst into the room, their weapons drawn, but they hesitated, unsure whether to defend their ruler or arrest him. Lord Takeshi stepped forward, his voice firm. "The Emperor's tyranny ends now. Sushivania needs a new path." The guards exchanged uncertain glances before lowering their weapons. The Emperor, defeated and betrayed, sank to his knees. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his words carried no weight. The days that followed were a blur of rebuilding and reflection. Eldoria, finally free from Sushivania's invasions, began to recover its stolen resources. Fields were replanted, rivers restocked, and hope returned to the people. Hana stood on the border of Eldoria, watching as her people worked together to heal their land. Queen Mira approached her, a look of pride and gratitude in her eyes. "You've done more for Eldoria than anyone could have asked," Mira said. "Your bravery has given us a future." Hana bowed her head. "I only did what needed to be done, for our people." But not all was easily resolved. The court of Sushivania was left in disarray, its future uncertain. Lord Takeshi, now a key figure in the restructuring, promised to lead the kingdom away from tyranny and toward a more balanced existence. As for Hana, she returned to her quiet life in Eldoria, though her heart carried the weight of her actions. She had succeeded, but at a great cost. The scars of her mission would remain, a reminder of the price of freedom. Eldoria and Sushivania began to rebuild, their histories forever intertwined. And though the obsession with sushi remained, it was tempered by a newfound respect for the balance between indulgence and restraint. The legacy of Hana's actions would shape both kingdoms for generations to come. The sun rose over Eldoria and Sushivania, casting a golden glow on the land that had seen so much conflict. For the first time in years, the air carried a sense of calm, though it was fragile. Delegates from both kingdoms gathered in a neutral valley, their faces etched with both hope and caution. Queen Mira stood tall among Eldoria's representatives, her voice steady as she addressed the assembly. "We seek not revenge, but understanding. Our lands have suffered greatly, and it is time we learn to coexist." Lord Takeshi, now the de facto leader of Sushivania, nodded in agreement. "The Emperor's obsession with sushi blinded us. We owe Eldoria a debt for the pain we have caused. Together we can rebuild, not as enemies, but as neighbors." The negotiations were tense, each side hesitant to trust the other. But Hana's actions had opened a door that neither kingdom could afford to close. Slowly, agreements were reached. Shared resources, fair trade, and the cessation of invasions. A fragile peace began to take shape. Hana watched from the sidelines, her heart heavy with the sacrifices that had led to this moment. As the discussions drew to a close, Queen Mira approached her. "This peace is your legacy, Hana. You've given both kingdoms a chance to start anew." Hana smiled faintly. "It's a beginning, but there is still much to heal." Years passed, and the scars of the past began to fade. Eldoria flourished, its fields and rivers once again teeming with life. Sushivania, too, changed. The once obsessive pursuit of sushi gave way to a more balanced appreciation of its cultural significance. Sushi remained a symbol of both kingdoms, but it was no longer a source of conflict. In Sushivania, new leaders emerged to embrace the idea of harmony over conquest. Festivals were held to celebrate the art of sushi making, inviting chefs from both lands to share their skills and stories. Hana, now an elder in Eldoria, watched these changes with quiet pride. She had returned to her craft, teaching the next generation the beauty of sushi, not as a weapon, but as a bridge between people. One evening, as she sat by the river that once ran dry from Sushivania's raids, a young girl approached her. "Mistress Hana, is it true you went to the Emperor's court?" Hana chuckled softly. "Yes, child. And it taught me that even the smallest actions can change the course of history." The girl's eyes widened. "Do you think we'll ever fight again?" Hana gazed at the horizon, where the sun dipped below the hills. "I hope not. But if we remember the lessons of our past, perhaps we won't need to." The river flowed peacefully, a symbol of the new era. One where the power of food united rather than divided. And as the kingdoms of Eldoria and Sushivania continued their journey forward, sushi remained at the heart of their cultures, a reminder of the delicate balance between indulgence and restraint, destruction and creation. Please subscribe to our channel for more amazing food stories. Thanks for watching and see you in our next story.